a sign glass yesterday during this 5-hour wrap-up. He said any single one of the unlawful means is enough for you to conclude that the Trump Tower conspiracy violated New York state election law. You don't have to agree on which unlawful means were involved. Andy, can you interpret that for us? Because I thought they were arguing federal law. Or did he get to that later?
Well, I can interpret it, but I can't, bring it into the line with the United States Constitution. But here we go. What's supposed to happen in a criminal trial is a prosecutor has to prove every element of an offense beyond a reasonable doubt. So every crime, which is a creature of some statute, has different elements. One is a mental element, and then there are the things that you have to do to commit the crime. So like with bank robbery, you have to, take money by force from a financial institution and do it intentionally. And those are the things the prosecutor has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. What this judge is telling this jury in this kind of make it up as you go along New York State prosecution of federal law is that when they get to the end of the rainbow and we get to the elements of the offense, the jury doesn't have to be in agreement on what it is exactly that Trump did or what he was trying to commit or conceal when he allegedly falsified his business records. So they're going to give the jury a menu of choices and tell the jury that some of them may believe that this was the criminal objective. Some of them may believe something else was, but that they don't have to be unanimous on that. I actually think that's pretty outrageous, but in this case, I'm not sure it makes the top 10 of outrageous.
And good evening. Welcome back Inside the Law. I'm your host, Philip Holloway. There's a lot going on in the news today. We have, of course, jury deliberations in Manhattan underway in the prosecution of former President Donald Trump related to allegations that he falsified business records and that he did so for the purpose of furthering some other crime. And we now have finally, now that the jury has got the case at the end of the trial, we finally heard what at least some of the potential other crimes might be. That news clip at the beginning, my friend Andy McCarthy is unable to make this work in the constitutional framework. And I agree with him. If you are new to this channel, you may not have heard this before, but if you're not new, well, you've heard us talk about this before. This is just not constitutional. This is not how the justice system is supposed to work. First off, an indictment has to put people on notice of exactly what they're charged with in the case. But before that happens, the grand jury has to find there's probable cause to believe that a defendant committed a crime. And by that, I mean each and every element of the crime charged. The grand jury in this case did not present any charges that allege that Donald Trump committed any kind of business record misdemeanor in the furtherance of any other kind of crime. The reason that was done is because they really didn't know what they might be able to prove. So they just decided to throw anything and everything up against the wall and give the jury, the ability to pick and choose. What it boils down to, the judge in his charges gives the jury an option. Okay. He says that they can choose between a violation of federal campaign law, which of course Alvin Bragg has no authority as a state prosecutor to prosecute. He also said that the jury could maybe pick a second choice if they can't unanimously agree on whether it's a campaign, it could be another business record crime or even tax fraud. So basically they get to pick and choose. In other words, they don't have to have a unanimous verdict. So let me show you this. And I pulled this from Alvin Bragg's own website. And he says here that the jury must be unanimous on each and every element of the crime charged. After the jury's instructions, the assistant DA and the defense attorney are given the opportunity to ask for additional instructions or to object. But in any event, he's very clear. And also, the Attorney General, Letitia James, she argues that verdicts must be unanimous. And that's in fact what the law is. So we have ourselves a very interesting situation. And honestly, I think it's absurd. But you've got the jury considering charges that were never brought by the grand jury. So the other crime that is sought by prosecutors in this case is an essential element. In other words, if they don't find some other crime, then it's not a then the indictment is not valid. It's not guilty. So the judge has waited until the end of this case and has now decided that these are the three options that the jury has. Never mind the fact that Donald Trump was not indicted for any business record offense in pursuit of any of those other three possibilities. The reason that business records need to be, accurate, and the reason that it's a crime is because you don't want bookkeepers to be able to defraud businesses and investors in businesses. And there's no allegation in this case that anybody was defrauded. There's no victim here. The Trump book of business at the Trump organization is literally, it's a record, and it's sort of set aside back on a shelf or on a computer somewhere. It's not the kind of thing where anybody was defrauded that's an investor in the company. So it's a misuse of the misdemeanor version of this law, which, by the way, the statute of limitations is only 2 years. And the only reason it still survives is because they've alleged this so-called other crimes. And if you've been with us before here inside the law, you understand that a defendant has to be put on notice of what he or she is accused of. And they have to be put on notice with specificity. It can't be vague. It can't be something that you have to guess at. It's not supposed to be something that you've got to wait until the jury is instructed by the judge to know what the hell you're having to defend against. So in any event, we have covered this. There are videos on this channel. Feel free to go and watch those for more in-depth explanations as to, what an indictment is supposed to be about. We have 400 people or so in here. Welcome. I appreciate each and every one of you. I see the chat is very active, and I'm going to do my very best to answer as many questions as I can. But one thing that I wanted to make sure that we get into tonight is, what a conviction might look like. And by the way, I predicted on X this morning, I was thinking about this overnight. I predicted, what are the odds of an acquittal out of this Manhattan jury that probably despises Donald Trump, certainly despises him politically? Can they put their bias aside or not? So I predicted that, there's probably 0% chance of an outright acquittal. And then I said it's probably 50-50 between a conviction and maybe a hung jury. Having thought about this, I'm a little bit more concerned now because I think that the judge has given this jury an easy pathway. Basically, he literally said, and if you watched me in previous streams or previous videos, the scenario that I hypothetically set out was, I said you could have 4 members of the jury that believe it was crime A. I said you could have 4 members of the jury that believe it was crime B and 4 that believe it was crime C, and they still would be authorized, according to this judge's unlawful instructions, they would be authorized to convict. And that was exactly the scenario that was, I think, presented during the jury charges and how the judge explained this to them. So they don't have to unanimously agree on what this other crime is. So because of that, I think that changes the probability. I think it's probably more likely than not that the former president is convicted. Now, of course, this is going to go down in history as a trial that was conducted unlawfully. I'm sure it's going to be reversible error, but the problem that we have learned about previously with reversible error is that it takes years and years and years for an appeals court to get to this, to get to reversing a case. We saw with Harvey Weinstein recently. Harvey Weinstein, it took years for his case to get reversed because a judge in that case allowed in a lot of irrelevant evidence that was put in by a prosecutor only for one purpose, which was to unlawfully smear a defendant. And it was to the point that the trial was unfair, and the Court of Appeals wound up reversing it. But that takes years. Okay. So that's really the long-term fix. In the short term, if the jury finds that the former president of the United States is guilty of any of these bookkeeping offenses, then he becomes, at least in the short term, a convicted felon. So what happens to convicted felons? Well, there's it could play out a number of different ways. So let's just start with the worst case scenario. When someone's convicted of any crime, certainly a felony, there's the possibility of jail. Okay. Now, I've had guests here with me inside the law. Paul Morrow recently came in, and Paul's a very good lawyer, former NYPD inspector in Manhattan. He's got the thumb on the pulse of the city, so to speak, in terms of the legal system. And he believes that the chances of Trump going to jail are almost zero. And he might be right, because in New York, apparently they don't put anybody in jail for much of anything. But I am not so sure. Okay. I'm not so sure that this judge is not the one who's just gnashing at the bit, so to speak, to be the judge to go down in history as putting Donald Trump in prison. So that could very well happen. I don't know what that would look like, because you've got Secret Service issues, but reportedly the Secret Service has been discussing this possibility, and I guess they've got to be prepared for anything. Now, having said that, maybe it's unlikely that he goes to jail, because after all, the man's got no criminal history. This is not a violent offense. This is a bookkeeping crime, and there's no victims. Okay. So if you look at it in that context, it's not the kind of case ordinarily you would expect there to be a jail sentence for. So what else can a judge do? A judge could put someone on probation. So what is probation like? A probation is a jail sentence that you're allowed to serve outside of the confines of jail, outside the walls of the prison, so to speak. And you're allowed to stay outside of the jail as long as you abide by certain conditions. And there are standard conditions of probation in every state. And then you have what's called special conditions of probation. The general conditions of probation are straightforward things that you might think, it's common sense. You don't break any laws. You got to report to your probation officer when they tell you to. In some states, you've got to let them visit you at home or elsewhere. You got to submit to random screens for drugs or alcohol or things that you're not supposed to take without a prescription. You could be subject to all those things. You could be put on a curfew. You could be ordered to stay at a certain address. Those are the kinds of special conditions that are discretionary and oftentimes up to a judge. So in the event that this jury convicts Donald Trump of one of these 30 some odd counts, 36, I guess it is, 34. If they find him guilty on just one, Judge Merchan has the ability to put the man on house arrest, to give him a curfew. He could say, you can't leave the state. He could say, you got to check in with probation every week, every 2 weeks, every month, whatever. That's in addition to any fines. And we know that Judge Merchan is not above fining Donald Trump. He's already been fining him for violating the unlawful gag order. So in the short term, this is what realistically could happen. And it could happen as early as tomorrow. So this is very serious stuff. This is why I didn't even play the intro to the show tonight, because this is not a festive occasion. This is actually it's a sad occasion, because what you see the weaponization of the justice system aimed directly at a specific individual who is disliked by the judge, disliked by the prosecutor. And so now they have a chance to really put the screws to the man that they hate the most, Donald Trump. All right. There's 584 people in here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And please hit the like button. That helps it helps everybody find us. It's through the algorithm that YouTube and other streaming services, they pay a lot of attention to like. So please help us out by liking the show, even if you don't like talking about what we're having to talk about tonight. When someone's on probation, they are not a free person. Okay. So we just went through, that you're subject to rules, and you're literally, at the whim of the judge, so to speak, and what the terms are of your life, how you live your life. So can you run for president? Well, there's nothing per se that says you can't, but if a judge says you're on house arrest, maybe you can't. And then what if you get elected to be president, but Juan Merchan has you on probation? What does that look like? We are truly in uncharted territory here, folks. And it's quite frightening. It's scary to think about how a judge could literally have a president of the United States on probation. Now, there's one possibility, and this is something that I really don't know how it would play out. There's something called an appeal bond. Okay, so when you've got a conviction after a jury trial, your conviction it's not exactly a final conviction because you have not exhausted your right to appeal. There's a right to appeal any conviction, and until your appeal rights are exhausted, it's not a final conviction. So a judge has the discretion to grant what's called an appeal bond. And if you get an appeal bond, then any sentence that the judge may have imposed is stayed. In other words, it's sort of, you hit the pause button on it, and the conditions of probation, or if it's a jail sentence and you get an appeal bond, then the jail sentence would not exactly kick in. So those are the scenarios. You know, you've got the potential for jail, whatever that may look like. And look, I am in the camp that I am not convinced they're not trying to jail former President Trump. But at a bare minimum, it looks like the judge has engineered these jury charges in such a way so that it makes it very easy for a jury that may not be unanimous on things to convict him. So if they get a conviction on just one of these felony counts, Donald Trump could have to live his life under the direction of Judge Juan Merchan. Think about that. I want to go ahead and open this up. I want you to ask me any questions that you may have. And do me a favor, if you have a question, if you preface it with the word question, that means, it's easier for me to see. And we have our moderator, Kiana Shaw, in here tonight as well. And she can help me flag these questions. And of course, thank you, Tim, for the super chat. And thanks for those of you who have joined and may choose to join in the future as members of the channel. Thank you very much. Here's a question. Okay. 2 lawyers are on the jury. Would they not realize how bizarre the judge's instructions are? And how can he be convicted of different charges if not all the jurors unanimously vote the same? Well, the second question, that's the reason that we're here talking tonight. I have never seen this before. I don't understand how a judge could do this. I honestly don't. I am just absolutely stunned. This is not this is so far outside the norm of constitutional law, of criminal procedure, that it's those of us who work and live in this legal system are just absolutely stunned. So let me, in case you just joined us, let me invite you to take a look. This is what Letitia James, this is from her own website. Okay. She argues that states need to make it a requirement that juries be unanimous. Okay. In felony trials. Some states may have it where you don't have to be unanimous. Certainly the states can control this, but as a matter of federal law, it's in the Constitution. But Letitia James is arguing that in states, state procedure, state practice, she's arguing that verdicts should be unanimous. Again, I brought this up. This is from the District Attorney Alvin Bragg's own website, where he says the court instructs the jury on the law and explains legal concepts such as presumption of innocence and the elements of the crime charge. And he goes on to say that the jury must be unanimous in that. So, of course, we have Judge Merchan who says, no, they don't need to be. And this is why this is so perplexing to me and others. But thank you. That's a very good question. The first question that you posed, however, would the lawyers realize that these are bizarre jury instructions? I hope so. It's my understanding that these are not criminal lawyers. These may be business or corporate lawyers, lawyers who don't practice in the area of criminal law, but maybe they did at some point in time, and maybe they remember law school, because this is kind of basic stuff here. So one can only hope that that is the case. Thank you very much for the good question. This is a question from Denmark. It always amazes me how people from all over the globe find us here inside the law, and welcome from Denmark. What can be done regarding the New York bar? So I assume that the question refers to the state bar of New York in terms of licensing attorneys and perhaps processing complaints. I would not, let's just say this, I would not pin my hopes on the state bar of New York taking any punitive action against any individuals for how they have conducted this case. So I'm sure that people have filed complaints, but I'm not so sure, and I would not hold my breath that the state bar does anything. Thank you very much for the question, and thanks for watching all the way from Denmark. Jim asks, why can't the Supreme Courts stop corrupt politicians and judges? Well, look at it like this. The Supreme Court of this, well, first off, in New York, the trial court is called the Supreme Court, but I think what you mean is the highest court in the state of New York, or the Supreme Court of the United States. So those are appellate courts, and yes, they can reverse decisions of trial judges, just like we saw in Harvey Weinstein. They can say, look, you were out of bounds, judge, you were out of bounds here, you were out of bounds over there, you did this, that, and the other thing that were wrong, and it's reversible error. But that could, again, that could take years and years. We just cannot put all of our eggs in the appeal basket, because unless or until there's a reversal, then the person who is convicted is at the whim of the judge, if the judge has that person on probation. Very good question. And Paul asks a good question. So is any kind of plea deal still available? Well, a plea deal is available if and when a prosecutor makes a plea offer, or alternatively, if the defense, and sometimes it happens this way, sometimes the defense can make the first overture, but a plea deal is like a contract. You got to have an offer and you got to have an acceptance by both parties. And I don't think that there's ever been any discussion of any plea deals in this case. Theoretically, it's possible at any point in time. I have seen actually plea deals even after a jury's verdict. So if the parties believe that there was some kind of reversible error, they could set aside the verdict by agreement and enter a plea deal. So theoretically, it's possible. Very, very unlikely, but great question. Chris is asking, can the conviction be appealed to the Supreme Court instanter, which in the law means right away? Well, yeah. I mean, you can file a notice of appeal pretty quickly, but until there's transcripts, the court reporter is sitting there taking all this down on those fancy machines. So you got to compile the record, which is all of the pleadings. It's a transcript of all the testimony. It's all of the exhibits that were entered in a case. And in a big case like this, that could take months, if not years, just to do that part. So as a practical matter, you just got to wait. You've got to let the appellate process run its normal course. And it is not quick, which of course was the question that Michael's asking. How long is the appeals process? It's, suffice it to say, it would be years and years. All right. 782 people now in here. Welcome each and every one of you to Inside the Law. This, by the way, in case you're new, this is where we bring you inside the real justice system, and we show you things like this. This channel is not just about talking about the Donald Trump case. It's not just about talking about the Donald Trump case in Atlanta with Fani Willis, although we do that, and there's some news on that I'll get to in just a little bit. But this is the channel where we take you inside the real justice system, but we use the cases, the things that are in the news today, that are current events, and we use these as an opportunity to learn something and to explain how the real system works. And it's not like you think it is on TV. So welcome to all of you. Please hit the like button, help others find me. All right. So I saw a great question here. and the chat is moving so fast, you guys, I may miss it. So if you ask a great question and I miss it, make sure you ask it in the comments on this video, because I will go after the live stream ends. I will go and I will look at questions and comments, and I do my very best to try to respond. Here's the question: couldn't the Supreme Court step in and quash this? Well, no, they can't. They have no power right now because, first off, the issue is not properly before them, and due to separation of powers and the federalist system that we have, where you've got the states are sovereign entities in and of themselves, a case cannot be brought before a federal court. It's not during the direct appeal, which goes through the state appeals process, but you've got to go through that process first. And then if there's a federal constitutional question that's not been resolved, that could potentially be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, either directly from the highest court in the state or through what's called the habeas corpus, which we call that a collateral appeal. But I don't want to get too much in the weeds. The short answer is that, as a practical matter, no, they can't. There's nothing they can do. They are powerless right now to step in and stop something, that even if it's a manifest injustice. Similar question: is there no one with higher power who can step in and stop this? No, I mean, there's really not. And this is a subject of a stream that we did recently. I said, what can be done about this with acting justice, or Judge Merchan, I should say. And the short answer is that there's nobody with any higher power who can do anything right now. It's truly his fate, if not the trajectory of our nation, literally could be in the hands of these jurors from Manhattan. So as a practical matter, there's just not anything that anybody can do, at least not in the short term. This is an interesting comment, and I'm glad that Didi, I'm glad that you made this comment, because I think it's correct. They want to be able to call Donald Trump a felon. They want to be able to campaign, as we saw yesterday, I think it was, outside the courthouse with Robert De Niro. And the Biden campaign literally held a campaign event outside the courthouse. If you're in charge of the Biden campaign, I would think that you would want to stay completely away from this case, because already, I think correctly, Donald Trump is referring to these as the Biden trials, because it's widely perceived as being a political weaponization of the justice system. So it seems to me that it was a mistake for the Biden campaign to get outside the courthouse yesterday and basically hold an event, right outside the courthouse. They're trying to essentially troll Donald Trump. So they want to call him a felon for purposes of the election. And I think that's really about it. Scott asked a question. And by the way, I'm not screening these in advance. So these questions are literally, as I see them, I'll pull them up. I may regret that one day, but anyway, Scott asked the question: what if the Supreme Court comes back saying that the president is immune from prosecution when they render the decision that is before them? And that's a very good question. So you remember that there are other cases pending one in Georgia is a state case, but then you've got two federal cases in the federal system, one in the District of Columbia and one in the documents case down in Florida. Particularly the one in DC is the vehicle that they're using to appeal. The issue is basically, does a president enjoy any particular immunity from being criminally prosecuted for actions that he or she were to undertake in their official capacity while president? So that issue, if it's decided in favor of Donald Trump, then that could actually be the end of the federal cases. But I think it's more likely than not that the Supreme Court will not exactly answer that question, because the trial judge in that case has not made a determination if this was an official act or an unofficial act, or whether it was some kind of hybrid of the two. All right. But the question, that's a long answer to a short question. If the Supreme Court says the president is immune, it does not deal with this. It would not deal with this alleged conduct, because this is not allegedly conduct that he undertook in his official capacity at all. So I don't think the question would reach if Trump wins that appeal in the Supreme Court. I don't think that would affect this case, but I think it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. Maria Bartiromo from Fox Business said, if they put Trump in jail, the market will crash because nobody wants to do business in the banana republic and no one will invest in American bonds. I certainly don't know. Look, Maria is the business brain, not me. That's not my lane, so to speak. I don't know, honestly, what the markets would do. I think that by now, a lot of this is probably baked into the cake. And so our markets are probably already expecting some conviction somewhere for former President Trump. But I do think, particularly with the fraud case, the civil fraud case, they have demonstrated that New York is certainly not a business friendly place. Okay, so another question. Worst case scenario. Sorry, I missed it, but Stacy points out worst case scenario is Trump is incarcerated without Secret Service. I don't think there's any chance that he's going to be incarcerated without Secret Service. I think that he's entitled to Secret Service protection. I think they would be right there with him every step of the way, which is why I'm kind of thinking that, if there is a conviction, I'm thinking that this judge would like nothing more than to jail him, but he might think that that's so impractical that he just puts him on house arrest or puts him on probation with some really, really strict conditions. But again, this is best guess based on what we've seen so far. Other lawyers don't agree with me. Other lawyers think that there's a decent chance or that there's no chance that he's going to go to jail. I'm not in the no chance category. I think there is some chance. Maybe it's small chance, but I think that if this judge thinks he can figure out a way to do it, I think he would like to do that. Senior Chief points out he could get another bookend photo. He could order him to go to jail for one day. He could order him on house arrest, and things that could result in another bookend and another mugshot. That absolutely could happen. Absolutely. All right. Keep the questions coming. We have 1,000 people in here watching live. Welcome to Inside the Law. In case you're new here, this is where we take you inside the real justice system, and we show you the good stuff, the bad stuff, and the stuff that's really, really scary and frightening and ugly, which is what we're seeing take place right now in New York. I'm answering questions as they come up. Our friend Dear Woke Christian, who himself just got through with his own live stream that I watched a piece of that. He was talking about Fani Willis in church today, and I think that was a great discussion. If you haven't, please subscribe to his channel as well and check him out. He's got some good thoughts on things, particularly as it pertains to the Fani Willis case issues. And we're going to talk more about her. The question here is, as long as the felon title is associated. Now, that's not a question. Come on. But it's a great comment. As long as the felon title is associated, I'm sure they don't care about jail. And I think that's a reasonable position. I think, some people believe that is, in fact, the whole point is to label him a convicted felon. But if they do that, it's going to backfire. He's going to this is only enhancing the notion that he is a victim, and it's getting a lot of people who might not ordinarily be all that sympathetic to Donald Trump. A lot of people are sympathetic to this particular issue. Red Bandit asked the question, could Donald Trump pardon himself? Well, no president can pardon for a state law violation. Okay. No president can do that. Presidents can pardon for violations of federal law. So there's no presidential pardon that would be available for this New York case. I do think, and I don't think there's any reason, there's nothing stopping a president from pardoning himself as it pertains to federal charges. And of course, there are a couple of those. Question here is, for bar ethics to be applied to the judge, must it be in writing? And how does that work? Each state is different. There are judicial canons of ethics. There are attorneys' canons of ethics. Prosecutors, by the way, this is a good opportunity to talk about the very special and unique ethical obligation that prosecutors bear that no other lawyer has. Prosecutors have the extra ethical burden of doing justice, whatever that looks like. Their obligation is to seek justice, not just a conviction. So if justice requires dismissing a case or not moving forward, then that's what prosecutors are expected to do. So they are not expected to use their power, which is immense. They are not expected to use that power and literally turn it and aim it like a shotgun, like a double barrel shotgun, and aim it directly at a certain citizen. They're not supposed to campaign on getting a certain citizen and jailing a certain citizen. That's not how it's supposed to work. So prosecutors have a heightened burden, a heightened ethical burden. And so each state bar has processes by which they can investigate things, but I think it would have to be in writing. And I'm sure they are overwhelmed with complaints regarding this particular case already. Are they going to do anything? I doubt it. I doubt it very seriously. All right, let me change gears just for a second. We'll come back. I'll continue to answer questions on Trump verdict watch. And by the way, I think that we're going to get a verdict tomorrow. There was a couple of questions today. I think they were wanting to hear more about the jury instructions, but I think these people have been at this long enough. I think they're ready to get on with it. I don't think it's going to go certainly past Friday, but my prediction is we're probably going to have some kind of a verdict tomorrow. And of course, whatever that is, we'll be back here inside the law talking about it. By the way, Mimi says she subbed just now. Thank you for that. And thank you for everyone else. We are closing in on 35,000 subscribers. That's my next goal. Thanks for helping me get just a little bit closer, Mimi. I appreciate that. All right. So I want to switch gears for a second, because just as I was getting ready to literally hit the button to go live, someone brought something to my attention, and let me share that with you now. This is our prosecutor here in Fulton County, Georgia. I'd never seen this account before, Executive X, and so I don't know all the ins and outs of this, but you can rest assured I'm going to try to find out. But Executive X on Twitter says, there's a breaking new investigation revealing Fani Willis was involved in a multi-state election fraud and money laundering enterprise. The investigators identified the Fani Willis campaign finance report, 222 contributions to her campaign that had zero donor information. And let me pause. I'm just reading this. This is not my words. I don't know if this is true. I'm reading this for context because I'm going to tell you what I think this is about. But the post goes on to say that many of the donors were out-of-state elderly people. When contacted about making campaign contributions to Fani Willis, one of the elderly people on the list stated that she had never made a campaign finance contribution to her campaign. So what exactly is this about? Let me let's share this one now. Okay, so now we have, this is an article it's on the Gateway Pundit. This is from February, so it's a couple of months old. So when Executive X says this is new, well, it's not exactly brand new, because there's some stuff pertaining to this claim going back a couple of months, but I think it's just now being investigated by the state ethics board that sort of has jurisdiction over how state politicians run their campaigns. So this is, we're going to have to see what else is going on with this. It deserves a lot more than I've had a chance to look into it. But if you've ever heard of something called smurfing, I think that's what the term is. And I'm told that smurfing involves splitting large sums of money into smaller, more easily concealable amounts of funds to avoid detection. I'm told that that's sort of what is at issue here. So this is something that we are going to watch. This doesn't cite any particular source. I don't know what this is about, but I'm certainly going to be following up on it. And I believe that this is based on these. I believe that this is based on these claims here, and I believe that it's just now being investigated by the state. There's even this article from February says a complaint alleges that nearly half of the campaign contributions amounting to $168,000 are linked to illegal activity, including money laundering and identity theft. Those are some big claims. I think it's now being looked at by the appropriate authorities in the state of Georgia, and we're just going to have to check back and see what's going on here. By the way, speaking of the Fani Willis case, the current state of the affair with that is, no pun intended, they are accepting the appellate briefs from the defendants who have joined in the petition and the appeal to remove her from the Trump RICO prosecution in Fulton County. The prosecution is going to be submitting their reply briefs. The prosecution is also appealing. The judge had ordered a number of the charges against Trump, and some of the others he actually dismissed those from the indictment, but not the remainder of the charges. So Willis and the DA's office is doing a cross appeal. They're appealing that issue at the same time. But we're getting all the briefs in, and I think we're going to have oral argument sometime in the neighborhood of, I would say, August, and then probably a ruling a couple of months after that. Sometime probably before the end of the year is my best guess. All right. Back to the chat. We've got almost 1,100 people in here. Thank you very much. Feel free to discuss in the chat, and feel free to ask any questions that you may have, and I'll do my very best to try to answer them here while we have a little time. But in case you are just joining us, we are talking about the Donald Trump case. The jury is, of course, deliberating as we speak. They're going to come back tomorrow. The judge in that case has told them they do not have to unanimously determine what the so-called other crime is. The judge is letting them choose between, it's a violation of federal campaign law, falsification of other business records, or even tax fraud. None of those things are alleged in the indictment. There was no probable cause for any of those things being found by the grand jury, and it was not presented in the indictment. And so it is entirely unconstitutional and illegal to put them in this late in the game and allow the jury to consider that. But this is the state of affairs where we are. Question. Saw earlier questions regarding Bush versus Gore and the urgency of the case and the precedents regarding direct appeal to the Supreme Court. So for those of you who are old enough to remember or can check it out on, it's a matter of history now in the U.S. Back in 2020, we had the election for the presidency was tied up in litigation in the state of Florida. And there was these recounts and things that were ordered because the states run their own elections. Each state is entitled to run its election pretty much how it wants, with certain exceptions. But this is entirely a question of, is the state doing something that's legal or not? And so there was questions at the time, does the Supreme Court actually have the power to do that? And so as it turns out, the answer was yes, because there was such a federal question. But we're not there yet in this case because Donald Trump is not the nominee, not yet. And we're not running up on a hard deadline like the Constitution sets for when the electors for the Electoral College have to be named, and those identities have to be sent to Congress in December, middle of December following the election in November. So it was a very short time frame. So that's for those of you in Denmark who are wanting to know the answer to that. I think that this case is, it's certainly important. And yes, it does impact the presidential election, but unfortunately, we're not to the urgent sort of nature that Bush versus Gore was when they were still ordering recounts in the middle of December back in 2020. Great question, though. Thank you very much for that question. Prophecy breakdown. All right. Thanks for the super chat, by the way. They're always appreciated. That helps us to continue to bring new and hopefully better content to the channel. There's no way Merchan was randomly selected for Weisselberg, Cohen, and Trump. And by the way, now Bannon. Okay. He got Bannon as well. So, would this kind of corruption be prosecutable by the I think the answer is theoretically yes. I think that I think there's really no good reason why this case was not randomly assigned. It cannot be a coincidence that this judge, who's not even he's an acting justice, he's not even a regularly appointed judge, but why he has all of these associated cases is a head scratcher to me. I think it's probably illegal. I don't think the normal operating procedures of the court were followed, and there's got to be a reason. I'm sure you can think of a couple of reasons. I've got a few in mind why this judge has all the Trump cases and the cases remotely related to Donald Trump. Great point. Thank you for bringing that out. Next question. If this is unconstitutional, are there any federal powers that could bring charges? Well, in order for a federal prosecutor, you step back and look at this from the 10,000 foot level. In order for a federal prosecutor to get involved, the federal prosecutor's got to believe they have jurisdiction, and they got to believe that some federal crime was committed. And then they've got to have the will to prosecute. Prosecutorial discretion is it's a big deal. And prosecutors have wide latitude in what they can do, but if there's no will to do it, then it doesn't happen. And so I think there's no will to even consider whether this broke any kind of federal laws. But that's a very good point. We'll just have to wait and see. But I don't see any of this happening. Senior Chief has racketeering against the DA, and what certainly feels like they're involved in a racket, doesn't it? Because it certainly you can point to countless examples of how this is absolutely illegal, unconstitutional. Dear woke question. All right, let me see. All right, we're gonna see if I can do this. I'm gonna see if I can invite. Look at your text message if you're still here in the. Let's see if we can get you in here. If you're still with us, let's see if we can get Dear Woke Christian to join us. I just sent you the link where you can join. Have someone else here to talk about this and maybe answer some questions. So we'll see here in just a second if our friend Dear Woke Christian can make it in. Meanwhile, that's the question I just answered. Sorry about that. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right. Pamela asks, how does J.D. Vance's request to Garland for this to be investigated play into this as a deprivation of rights under color of law? So what J.D. Vance is talking about is Section 1983 of the United States Code, dealing with criminal violations of people's civil rights and civil liberties. But I think that asking the Attorney General of the United States to get involved in here is just not. I mean, it's just a non-starter. There's no political will. Anybody recognize this guy?
Hey, I know that guy. Hey, I know that guy. What's going on, man? How are you?
Well, we've been talking about getting together and doing something for a while, so let's just do it spontaneously.
What do you know about that? Let's do it. We're doing
it. We're doing it. What are you thinking about? What do you think about all this? I've been talking for a while now. You can help me out.
Phil, and when you stop by the show, first of all, my name is Jason from Dear Woke Christian. You stopped by the show, and I hope you heard that I have gleaned so much from you take some very weighty, very highbrow conversations, and you break it down. I mean, you put those cookies on the lowest shelf possible. Because I'm like, look, I'm a pre-K law student, and I don't know what the world I'm talking about. But Phil makes it very clear. I'm like, I feel like I'm smart. So thank you very much. I'm saying this on behalf of the whole chat. Even though this is not the best live chat in the whole planet, it's pretty close to it.
Oh,
thank you.
Great. high praise coming from you. Thank you so much. That means a lot.
It makes sense though. Go ahead.
You and I was going to tell everybody who may not know, you and I are actually neighbors, almost literally, because Jason looked me up when I first started this channel a couple of months back, and it turns out he's got a studio that's literally around the corner from my law office.
I'm gonna go protest outside your office tomorrow. I'm gonna protest outside.
Maybe. All right. Well, I'm not gonna be there. I've got Fox News tomorrow, so you may not find. But you can go protest all you want. I'll protest outside. But for a non-lawyer, you've done a good job yourself in getting into all these things. What are your thoughts on this Trump trial and the things we've been talking about?
Okay, I have to admit, initially it was. I was thinking it's just going to be a big nothing burger because I did not believe that it was going to go as far as it has gone. And to now see like, wait, these people really are crazy. They really are trying to do this. So it is kind of weird, but I guess my thoughts are for the American people to think about, okay, what do we need to do? Because Trump isn't going to save us. And I never thought that he was, mind you. But what do we as Americans need to do as, whoever will be the next president? What do we need to do to ensure that we're moving in a direction that we can all prosper and do well in? Because at the current moment, I think we all agree at this moment, these valedictorian gas prices, I think we all want to go back to, academic probation gas prices. So what can we do to see that come together? I think that's what we need to. That's what I'm hoping that we can start considering. And, I hate to see a man go to jail for something so asinine, but I think we should not look to the president or look to Trump rather to be some kind of savior for everybody, but rather what do we need to do for ourselves? That's
and that's a great point because look, I mean, it's the citizens and the just the ordinary people that, we vote for politicians on the local level, and local politicians affect our lives in oftentimes in much bigger ways than a president or a federal official does, because it's the state laws in New York that created this kind of system. It's the state laws in New York that created the ability to put someone like an acting Justice Merchan on the bench. It's the local politicians that have assigned him somehow magically all the Trump cases. So it's local politics that are now being, I think, weaponized in a way that can affect, the federal election and federal politics. But as citizens, we've got to be very mindful of who we put in power when we elect our local district attorneys. All right. Does that would be a good place to start, wouldn't it?
Amen to that. Absolutely. And goodness knows we've been talking about that for quite some while. And man, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, but I don't think we should be hand wringing. I don't think we should be, woe is me, the sky is falling. But, it is what it is. And that ultimately, go ahead. What were you about to say?
No, go ahead. Please.
No. I was going to say, because ultimately Christ is still in control. He still rules and reigns. And whatever happens here, it is what should happen. So at the end of the day, it is what's going to happen. So at the end of the day, the best we can do is continue to march on and do our best to hopefully bring some sanity to the equation. But we do realize that, hey, this is what we have.
Well, I think, if nothing else, the legal events of the last couple of years, I guess, have, I think, illustrated to a lot of Americans how really unfair the justice system can be. And, it's not until you are a victim of it that you understand how important it is that we have fairness in the system. We have fair prosecutors. We have fair-minded prosecutors who are, actually seeking to do justice, and we have fair-minded judges. That's what, people go through their lives, and unless they actually deal directly with the justice system, they just assume that if you're charged with a crime or you get indicted, you must be guilty, right? But at some point, and most of the time that is true, but we have a lot of people who get caught up in the system who have done nothing wrong, but they can be victimized by the unfairness of it. And once they become victimized by the potential unfairness, then they have, they become educated. But
Right.
now I think by extension, a lot of people who are not actually sitting in that courtroom as the defendant feel kind of like they are. So vicariously through Donald Trump, they are experiencing the potential for unfairness that is inherent in the justice system.
And I agree. And, I'm sure most of us probably have had that same opinion. Like, you know what? I don't worry about the justice system. I do what I'm supposed to do. I stay out of the justice mix. Well, now they've kind of shown you that even in that case, you could be doing something and you can end up being a part, dare I say, globally, a part of a situation that you did not intend to be a part of initially. So, man, it's craziness.
Well, did you hear my little discussion a little while ago about the? I know that you're following the Fani Willis situation here in Atlanta pretty close. When we were talking about that earlier, had you heard anything about that?
I had never heard that until you said it. I was like, I was expecting you to pop up with her at the church video or something. I had never heard of that either. I don't know who this person is.
I don't either.
The Elector X or whoever he is.
Yeah, I mean, it's undoubtedly, like I said, it has to do, I think, with this allegation. That's, it's a campaign ethics thing that I think the state is just now getting around to investigating. Of course, this is not proven or anything like that. We don't, unlike Alvin Bragg, we don't want to accuse people of things without, good reason. But I'm just think it's very interesting that this appears to be now something that's at least the subject of an investigation.
Yeah, I'm sure it's the right thing to do is to not jump on something before you have even a modicum of belief that it's true. And I don't know what to do with that one. It looks crazy, but it also kind of jives with what we thought probably during the disqualification hearing when she said things like she kept money out of her campaign and kept it in her house. So it kind of rhymes with stuff that some of us might have even been thinking. I wouldn't be surprised. However, I need some other verification. Like you said, even, outlets that are not favorable to Fani are not even talking about this. So that's going to cause me to be a little bit, at least have my spidey senses tingling a little bit.
All right, folks, don't forget, I want to answer any questions that you've got in the time that we have left. We got 1,000 people in here. Hit the like button if you hadn't already done it. Help folks find the channel. I want to answer a few more questions about the Donald Trump verdict watch that we are living through right now. These are truly historic times in America. These are be things that our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren will have to learn about in the history books, and we're living through it. We don't yet know how it's going to play out, but it is you can't deny the history of this. And I think that, like we were just talking about, if nothing else, this has certainly educated people to what the system, how it can be abused or misused. Patrick asks, are the appellate judges in New York elected, and he doesn't have much hope for fairness and justice on appeal? I don't know the answer to that question.
That's a great question.
I think I believe that, well, each state's different. Somebody in the chat is going to look it up and going to tell us here in about 5 seconds. But each state is different. I know that Merchan is not elected. I know he's appointed.
Right.
But each state is a little different. So we can use in Atlanta, we had with the Willis situation in Atlanta in that case. So we had Judge McAfee got appointed by the governor to fill a vacancy, but then he just had to stand for his own. He had to be elected in his own right. So you can kind of have a hybrid sort of situation like that. But that's a great point. Somebody's going to tell us in just a second. I bet the appellate judges.
Yeah. It's coming.
Thoughts on a federal officer being held liable in state court for federal law? How does that work? I don't know if you're referring, David, to like a police officer, or is this like a federal official? But there are certain laws, federal laws, that are in place that at least if you are such a federal official and you believe that you're being unfairly targeted, and we've seen this happen because we've seen some of the defendants here in Georgia try to have their federal case, their state case removed to the federal system. The idea is that, under the Constitution, you've got the supremacy clause, which says that the federal government is the, no pun intended, the federal government trumps state law. Okay. So the federal power trumps the state power. So you can't have, the reason for this law is you can't have rogue DAs going after, federal officials for doing their job. And if you think that's what's going on, there's supposedly this relief valve that means you can get it to the federal courts. But in real life, it's very, very hard to do. Are
there federal police officers? When you said,
so right. And we see this oftentimes in cases where, let's just say the U.S. Marshals are wanting to track down a fugitive. And this is a purely hypothetical. And in the process of doing so, they do something that a local DA, say Fani Willis, doesn't like, and she wants to prosecute them for violating some state law when they're simply carrying out their official duties. The statute that we're talking about can allow for removal. So that's kind of what that's about.
Okay, I got it.
All right. So the question Mimi asked, what happens if they find him guilty? Does he go to jail, straight to jail? Does he pass go? Does he collect $200? What happens before an appeal? Mimi, look, she says, sorry, I'm a nurse. And I don't know nursing. Okay. So, I mean, and I don't know everything about the law. I happen to know a little bit about this criminal system. And so the answer, I think, to the question is, and we covered this at the very beginning, but for those of you who may have missed the beginning, there's always, when you're charged with a crime, there's always the potential for jail. And you can't, until the judge decides, you can't take that off the table. But if you got somebody who's don't have any criminal record, it's not a violent crime. There's no like victims of this kind of fraud. So you got a situation where on paper, theoretically, this would be this would be a probationary kind of case, but But probation is a jail sentence that you serve outside the walls of the jail. And the judge gets to put conditions on your life, like report to probation when they tell you to. Can't leave the state. Maybe you're on house arrest. Maybe you got to get permission to travel. So you can, depending on what the terms are of your sentence, even probation can be very, very restrictive in terms of your liberty.
So I agree with that. I was just wondering, could this be one of the biggest, most elaborate negative ad campaigns on the planet to demoralize a people group, a swath of the voting population that I can't vote for a felon. I can't vote for this guy. Even though I agree 100% with what you're saying, but this guy's a felon. Like, oh my gosh. And really, like, I got this crazy picture in my mind that he's found guilty. He's found a felon. And they say, that's fine. You can go on probation because now you're person non grata. Nobody's going to want to vote for you. And it's going to be just miserable because for the rest of your days, you'll be a felon, a convicted felon.
And it's going to be, it's part of they want to label him as a felon because I know they've already got the campaign ads already.
Oh my gosh.
They've already got them produced. They're just waiting. I'm
not right, but go ahead.
The question here is there going to be a pre-sentencing hearing, and that usually takes time? Well, the judge can do it that way. Yeah, you can a pre-sentence hearing, pre-sentence investigation after a trial. If somebody's found guilty, they can set sentencing for some point in the future, and they will tell, usually the probation department or there's some entity that would be responsible for doing like a background check. I don't know that would necessarily happen, or it needs in this particular case. This whole thing, there's so much about this that's so unusual. We just don't know until it happens. But that's correct. Usually sentencing is not immediate, and I wouldn't expect that to be the case here either. They just want to label him as a felon. I agree. I appreciate you, Jason, for coming in here. Before tell everybody how they can find you.
Well, you can find me. I'm Jason Whitaker at Dear Woke Christian on YouTube. That's a great way to find me. You can find me on dearwokechristian.com as well. And all of my different socials are available from there. And I'm usually on here once or twice a day talking about various and sundry fun topics. We just got done talking about Fani Willis citing at another church, doing spiritual money laundering.
And so check out that stream. Jason does a very good job also with following every move of Miss Willis and what she's up to.
It's just wild, man. It's such a wild story.
And all right, big round of applause. Big round of applause for Jason, everybody. Let me hear you all the way through my computer screen. Thanks, buddy. We'll talk soon.
You got it, man. Take care, friend. Grace and peace.
Jason's a really good guy. I need to get him to help me. I like his studio so much better than mine. I need some help with that. So maybe he'll give me some help. He already has, actually. He's helped out a lot. Folks, we are in truly unprecedented territory. I don't know what's going to happen with this, but what I can tell you is that I'm absolutely 100% certain that this trial has not been conducted lawfully. I am certain that the judge is in the territory for reversible error. I'm certain that this would not survive any appeal as long as it's a legitimate and honest appeal. But I think in the short term, because we have this judge who has said that the jury does not have to unanimously agree on what the underlying crime is. So they could be 4 people that believe it was another alleged tax crime, another who might believe it was some type of other business record violation. Somebody might believe it's a campaign. They can pick and choose. It's like this, they're calling it the smorgasbord of jury charges. The judge is allowing these people to have a non-unanimous decision on one of the essential elements of the offense. And even Letitia James understands apparently that these things should be unanimous. Let me get back. Can't get myself off of here. There we go. All right. Even Letitia James understands that it's supposed to be unanimous. We're going to be here inside the law. We're going to be following all the movements of this. Look, we have people are going to be talking in the news media about this, just like we're doing now. And so I almost didn't do this stream tonight because I'm like, what can we add to the conversation that hasn't already been said? But I feel like it's so important that we just had to, to do a stream about this. And I'm sure we'll do one maybe tomorrow and the next day until we get some resolution of this very, very important and historic trial. Until then, thank you all very much for being here. Don't forget to hit the like button. Tell all your friends to subscribe. And I look forward to seeing everybody here back inside the law next time. Thanks so much and have a good night.